Welcome to the closing session of Week 4 of Progress. Before we transition to our final keynote, we first must run the officer installation ceremony. To guide us through the ceremony, I'd like to welcome National President, Brother Bill Brash.
Brothers of Phi Kappa Tau, it is now my duty as National President to receive your pledge of service to your chapter as you assume the duties of the office for which you have been chosen. Upon you has been imposed a confidence which is a high honor. In your hands have been placed the important functions governing chapter life. The progress, prestige, and reputation of your chapter has been entrusted to your guidance. The ancient landmarks of this fraternity have been committed to your care. Permit no innovations in the principles and rights of the fraternity, which will destroy the ideals which have come to us through the years as a heritage of much sacrifice and toil. Guard against dissensions among members of your chapter, knowing that peace and harmony are the chief supports of strength and power. If a brother fails in his duty to himself or his chapter, let it be your task to restore him in the spirit of true fellowship. Let me remind each of you that your honor and reputation are concerned in supporting with zeal the entire fraternity in which you are a member and an officer. Be worthy of the task to which you are called by making yourself intimately acquainted with all its obligations and by practicing all of the duties and requirements of your office. Let no motive tempt you to swerve from your duties, violate your earnest vows, or betray your sacred trust. You will now each raise your right hand, say "I," and pronounce your name as I call it. Repeat after me the following pledge. I do hereby promise, upon my sacred honor, to perform my duties as an officer of my chapter of Phi Kappa Tau to the best of my ability, without fear or prejudice, and with a strict adherence to the ideals of my fraternity. I now declare these officers of Phi Kappa Tau duly installed. Congratulations, brothers.
Now to introduce our keynote speaker for the night, National Counselor Michael French.
Good evening. I have the distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to you our next speaker. This is somebody I have known longer than most people in the fraternity, Dale Holland. Dale is married to his former college sweetheart, Sue Smith, for the past 2 years. Dale has 2 children. Son Sid is 19 and is a freshman at Virginia Commonwealth University, and his daughter Elena is a high school junior and attends Bishop O'Connell High School in Falls Church. He currently resides in Bonita Springs, Florida. He is the Vice President for Government Business Development for Satcom Direct Communication, and he has held that position since December 2013. Dale has a historic military career. He is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel with over 25 years of Department of Defense experience. His last active duty assignment was with the 89th Airlift Wing Vice Commander at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, where he served as second in command for 1,200 personnel responsible for the safe, comfortable, and reliable transportation of our nation's top civilian and military leaders. He served both President George W. Bush and Barack Obama as the Deputy Director of White House Military Office's Operation. Dale also served as navigator on Air Force One from 2001 to 2007, supporting President George W. Bush and the First Family. During his combat command in 2006, he served as an Expeditionary Operations Support Squadron Commander at Ali Air Base, Iraq, during Operation Iraqi Freedom, where his squadron was responsible for airlift operations and air traffic control radar coverage for the southern third of Iraq. Dale is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force's Air War College, the U.S. Air Force's Air Command and Staff College, and Central Michigan University, holding master's degrees in strategic studies, military operational arts and science, and public administration. He was a master navigator with over 4,600 hours in various military reconnaissance and VIP special airlift mission aircraft. Dale is also a 1987 initiate of the Beta Mu chapter at Kent State University. He was inducted into the Phi Tau Hall of Fame in 2006 and has been a long-term facilitator at the President's Academy for the past 7 years. At the National Convention in 2014, he was elected to the National Council. And in 2018, during our convention in Cleveland, he was elected to and currently serves as our National Vice President. He is a Bowl Society donor and a Phi Tau Heritage Society member. Dale is affiliated with other organizations. He's a lifetime member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the American Legion. He is a member of the Masons and a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. He has also volunteered with Scouts BSA. It is my distinct pleasure then to hand the floor over to Dale.
Phi Kappa Tau, by admitting me into membership, has conferred upon me a mark of distinction in which I take just pride. I truly believe in the spirit of brotherhood for which it stands. Good evening, brothers. My name is Dale Holland, and I'm honored to serve as your National Vice President. And I'm even truly honored to serve as your final keynote speaker in Progress, to infinity and beyond. What a fantastic program this has been. I sure hope everyone has got as much out of this program as I have. And I do appreciate everyone's hard work and volunteers, the time they've committed to our Progress program. I'm going to take you on a journey focused on brotherhood and how brotherhood has led a major impact on my life, both professionally and privately. A little background about me. I'm a 1987 initiate of the Beta Mu chapter at Kent State University in Ohio. During my time at Kent, I was a founding father of our Beta Mu colony, because our chapter was removed from campus in the 1970s, and some dedicated brothers thought it was important to bring Phi Kappa Tau back to Kent. And I was honored to be part of that heritage. At the time, I was also an Air Force ROTC, and I was an RA during my senior year in college. So free time did not exist in my book. A little plug for RAs out there. What a great recruiting tool for your chapters. I have some of the 3 or 4 of the best brothers in the Beta Mu chapter were residents in my hall. Interesting how they came along and became Phi Taus. Upon graduation from Kent, I began my career in the United States Air Force, a career that would span 25 years of my life, a career in which I traveled to all 50 states and over 90 countries around the world, a career in which I started out as a second lieutenant and worked up to the ranks to retire in the grade of colonel. Upon entering the Air Force, I attended undergraduate navigator training. I remind you, this was 1988 and technology has changed a great deal. I served as a navigator with some of the finest aviators in our Air Force, who I am proud to call my brothers. A brotherhood unlike most of you will ever experience, but I sure hope you try. Just like your chapter brothers, brotherhood spans far greater than your 3 or 4 years in your undergraduate fraternity experience. It lasts a lifetime. Please never forget that brotherhood lasts a lifetime and that brotherhood never dies. I'm going to roll back the clock a couple years to a specific day in my life. Not only in my life, it changed me, but it changed our nation. I was on an Air Force trip to Sarasota, Florida, and we had spent the night in Sarasota, and I was just finishing up breakfast with my sister who lived in the area, and I was going to give her a tour of the aircraft that I was on. As I was giving her a tour of the aircraft, the radio operator came up to me and said, "Hey, Major Holland, an airplane just hit the World Trade Center. And I looked, an airplane just hit the World Trade Center. It must have been like a news helicopter or something like that. So I continued on my tour with my sister, and about 10 minutes later, the radio operator came up and said, "Hey, Major Holland, a second airplane just hit the World Trade Center." A second airplane. So I looked at my sister and said, "I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave. You're going to have to leave." You see, that day was different. And the airplane I was flying on is a very important airplane. That airplane is Air Force One. I was a navigator on Air Force One on September 11th, 2001. A day that changed our nation and changed me profoundly. Upon early notification, we were told that the Pentagon was under attack, the White House was under attack, the Capitol was under attack. The whole world was falling down upon us. But we had a job to do. Our job was to protect the presidency of the United States. Immediately upon notification of the second airplane hitting the World Trade Center, we received word that President Bush would return to the airplane, and he wanted to depart and make way for Washington, D.C. As we took off from Sarasota, Bradenton that day, in the early morning hours, we were sure we were heading back to D.C., but at that time, the fog of war was coming upon us. The fog and the miscommunication of all the other threats that we were facing that day. As we flew up through the main spine of Florida, decided to go out west over the panhandle of Florida. And the military aide to the president came up to the flight deck to talk to us about landing at a military airfield, like a Navy base, to talk so the president could address the nation. Well, Air Force One's an Air Force asset. And I don't believe we're going to be landing at a Navy or an Army base on any day. As we continued out over the panhandle of Florida, we were told that we were a target. The Air Force One was a target from the Secret Service had heard warning. At that time, the national airspace was closed down because of a terrorist attack and the hijacking that occurred on the 4 different aircraft that they knew of. We didn't know about the aircraft in Pennsylvania, but we knew one had just impacted now the Pentagon. This is very serious. As we continue our flight that day, it was decided to land at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. The president wanted to address the nation. At that time, the technology wasn't capable for the president to address from Air Force One on live TV through a video telephone conference. So the president needed to address the nation, and we needed to get rid of, I like to call them strap hangers on the airplane that didn't really need to continue on with the journey with us. See, Air Force One is a capable aircraft that can fly indefinitely. It's air refuelable. It has a food supply that'll last over 30 days if needed. But I sure hope we weren't going to test it that day. So upon landing in Barksdale Air Force Base, we received Fighter Combat Air Patrol, or CAP as it's known. F-16s had joined us. They had flown out from Ellington Field in Houston, Texas. They provided combat air patrol and cover over Barksdale. My boss, Colonel Tillman, went with the president into the command center to brief the staff at Barksdale Air Force Base at the time, which was a SAC base, or Strategic Air Command Base, global strike nowadays. Upon sitting there in the flight deck, getting the airplane prepared to go, we loaded the airplane up as much gas as we could out of Barksdale. Barksdale, you see, is a B-52 base. It has nuclear bombers sitting on alert. At that time, one of the fighters that were providing combat air patrol called in Air Force One. We've got a bogey south of the airfield. Would you like us to take him out? To my surprise, I looked up at the co-pilot in the seat. I said, "You got to figure out what that airplane is." So the fighter rolled in for a visual on the airframe before it decided to light that airplane up. At that time, all aircraft in the U.S. airspace were grounded. This happened to be a crop duster. Farmer out tending his flock and tending to his crops in Louisiana. Boy, I wouldn't have been surprised that day when to see an F-16 come barreling in on you. Thank God we didn't make an unknown call on that. But the communication between the crews critical, between the flight deck, between the staff. It's very important that we communicate and have a great idea of what we're trying to do that day. Our office isn't, and our job in Air Force One is not to protect the president. It's to ensure that the presidency, the office of the executive presidency, not the individual. The president came back after making a statement. We removed a bunch of staff and press off the aircraft, and we went on our way to Omaha, Nebraska. Now, we didn't tell the press or anybody we were going. We didn't tell anybody because we still didn't know what was going on back in the nation's capital. The president was concerned about getting a hold of his cabinet members and his family and make sure they were safe. The vice president was in a secure facility in the east wing of the White House called the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. So we knew that he was safe and sound. And we knew we had the president with us. Secretary of State was in South America, so he was being recalled back to the States. There's a line of succession for the presidency, so you need to make sure you have all the successors in place and you can plan them. I believe there was a TV show recently, a lot of guys were really enthralled on called Success. I think it's what it was called, Successor. Anyhow, as we continue and get airborne en route to Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, the fighters continue to stay on our wings that day. Normally, Air Force One never had a flight fighters on our wings or anything like that. It's more of this is a national emergency. In fact, the fighters that day, when they were given a vector to intercept the target, they were told to intercept, don't take him out. But they did not know that the target that they were intercepting that day was Air Force One. Great pilots out of the fighter unit at Ellington Field in Houston. They land at Offutt after we do, and we met the crew, the fighter pilots in base operations. Now, the president was immediately scrolled away into a bunker at Offutt Air Force Base at Strategic Air Command headquarters, SAC, as our friends in the Omaha area know it. Finally, the president said, enough. I've had enough. I'm going back to DC. I don't care what anyone says. There's no more threats. We need to figure this out. At that time, the president ordered us to return the airplane back to Washington. We were not sure that was a great idea. We were safe in Omaha, Nebraska. We were in the middle of the heartland. And the president said, that's it. I'm not going to run. I need to get back home, the nation's capital. Make sure that people know that I'm here. President Bush served in my opinion, like John Wayne that day. He was mad. He was a true Texan, and he was upset that our nation was under attack and the events that occurred that day. At that time, we decided we took off and was heading east. Took off around 4:30 from Omaha, and we were heading back east to get back to the nation's capital, to get the president on the ground around 6:30 so we could address the nation that night at 7:30 or 7 p.m. So the president's address at 7 p.m. that night. As we were flying back across the country, Air Force One's a pretty fast aircraft. The coordination between the crew and the military aides and the staff continued, but we were screaming across the sky. I would say 0.96 on the Mach scale. It's right under the speed of sound. So it's a big airplane that can move pretty quick. In fact, we were going so fast as we got to the middle of the state of Ohio, the fighters called back and said, Air Force One, I need you to slow down. We're burning too much fuel. A fighter trades fuel for speed. The faster it goes, the more fuel it burns. So therefore, they're having trouble keeping up with us. So we continued. We did an orbit over the middle of Ohio around Columbus area. And at that time, fighters started to join our wings coming out of the Washington, D.C. area to give us an escort back into Andrews Air Force Base. That day was a surreal day. As we were beginning our approach into the Washington, D.C. area, you could see the smoldering remains of the Pentagon that were still burning. That's an image that you'll never forget, just like anything else in your life. You'll never forget. So we landed at Andrews. It was like the surreal day was ending, but it was actually beginning for our nation in the events of September 11th that led to future conflicts around the world. You see, my brothers, the brotherhood on that airplane that day is a bond that I can never repeat. The individuals on that airplane, the bond we shared that day is a bond that we'll take to our graves with us. But I want to explain to you about brotherhood. It's not just about the brotherhood that we feel for in times of conflict. The story I want to continue is brotherhood lessons in leadership. Brotherhood never dies was the motto of Phi Kappa Tau in the late 80s. I can't find it, but I do have my membership manual here. As I dig through it, I was kind of chuckling at some of the people Tim Hudson sure looks different nowadays compared to our executive offices back then. In my Phi Kappa Tau membership manual dated 1986. So I'm sure you don't have that one. Brotherhood Never Dies was a motto that I had at that time. In fact, in the Air Force, I use that motto. We have a secure mechanism. So if anything ever happens to you, if you're ever contained or captured, you have certain keywords or buzzwords that you can be asked to prove your identity. Well, my identity is, my fraternity's motto is Brotherhood Never Dies. And I laugh at that because it's stuck with me from my days at Kent through my whole 25-year career. Brotherhood never dies. Brotherhood ties the bind. Brotherhood is the ties that bind. And you'll hear that a lot in military speakers. It's because of the deep appreciation for friendships that are formed out of a common interest for wanting to serve their country. It's no different than a common interest you have in your chapter or your colony. You all have a common tied to each other. And it's important to get to know each other and respect each other and build upon that brotherhood. Charles Dickens said, the more man knows of man, the better for common brotherhood among men. How fitting. Charles Dickens said that. It is true that we get to hang out for 3 or 4 years with our brothers at our undergraduate chapter. But I'll tell you, Phi Kappa Tau's lasted my lifetime. I am part of the National Council. I am active in my alumni group at Kent State. I see great volunteer. You'll spend more time, brothers, as an alumnus in our organization than you will as an undergraduate member. So I encourage you to never forget about brotherhood. Our creed talks a lot about admitting us to membership, but it really talks about a thing that's important to me, and that is I believe in the spirit of brotherhood for which it stands. It has served me well through my Air Force career, and has served me well in my life since the Air Force. And I know it'll serve each and every one of you going forward. This week in Progress, the last 4 weeks, I should say, Progress has been a great opportunity for each and every one of you. Leadership tools for the future of Phi Kappa Tau. How fitting. Fantastic new tools to add to your leadership toolbox. Please don't let this opportunity slip by. You've learned how to organize your team, strategic planning. You're building inclusive leaders, recruitment, retention, risk management, philanthropy, and service. Your toolbox doesn't end when you walk out of your doors at your undergraduate college. They last a lifetime. You'll see in my bio that I'm not just an Air Force guy and I'm a national counselor for Phi Tau. I'm a lifetime member of the VFW, the American Legion. I'm a member of the Boy Scout troop where I served as assistant scoutmaster. It's all about service and giving back to your community. I hope each and every one of you take this opportunity in your undergraduate experience and your Phi Tau chapter experience to grow upon that and become a great servant leader. One of the questions I need to leave you with is, am I my brother's keeper? Well, are you? I think each and every one of you need to ask that question to yourself. It comes to us from the Old Testament, but it also comes to us through other things you'll notice on your Phi Tau journey. One of my final thoughts I'd like to leave you with this evening. We had a president that ended World War II. It was Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman's from Missouri. And I'll tell you what, Harry S. Truman said, the buck stops here. It was a phrase that he popularized. He kept a sign and a phrase on his desk in the Oval Office. The phrase refers to the notion that the president has to make all decisions except the ultimate responsibility for those decisions. Guess what, presidents and leaders of your chapter? You need to live by that too. The buck does stop there, and you need to be accountable in your leadership role for your chapter. And more importantly, be accountable for your decisions you make the rest of your life. I do think we need to take that a little bit more seriously. As I close today, I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for your commitment, and I want to thank you for your brotherhood. I'm here for you. I have been honored to be elected to the National Council. I am honored to serve as your National Vice President, and I am honored to become your National President this summer at convention as we lay out the rules and the guidelines for our modified convention in the summer of 2021. There'll be more information coming on that. But I give you my contact information on this slide. Please call me, send me an email. I might not get back to you immediately, but I will get back to you. Thank you, brothers, for your leadership, and go far. Thank you.
We will now transition to a live Q&A with Brother Dale Holland.